Sounds. The house was near the beach. It was a big old place where nobody had lived for years. From time to time, somebody would force open a window or a door and spend the night there, but never longer. 3 fishermen caught in a storm took shelter there one night. With some dry wood they found inside, they made a fire in the fireplace. They laid down on the floor and tried to get some sleep, but none of them slept that night. First, they heard footsteps upstairs. It sounded like there were several people moving about, back and forth, when one of the fishermen called, "Who's up there?" The footsteps stopped. Then they heard a woman scream. The scream turned into a groan and died away. Blood began to drip from the ceiling into the room where the fishermen huddled. A small red pool formed on the floor and soaked into the wood. A door upstairs crashed shut, and again the woman screamed, "Not me!" It sounded as if she was running, her high heels tapping wildly down the hall. "I'll get you!" a man shouted, and the floor shook as he chased her. Then silence. There wasn't a sound until the man who had shouted began to laugh. Long peals of horrible laughter filled the house. It went on and on and on until the fishermen thought they would go mad. When finally it stopped, the fishermen heard someone coming down the stairs, dragging something heavy that bumped on each step. They heard him drag it through the front hall and out the front door. The door opened, then it slammed shut. Again, silence. Suddenly a flash of lightning, filled the house with a green blaze of light. A ghastly face stared at the fishermen from the hallway. Then came a crash of thunder. Terrified, they ran out into the storm. Thank you for listening to yet another Mr. Creepy Wolf reading. Be sure to check me out every 2 weeks right here on All Wrestling Madness YouTube's channel. And while you're at it, check out the official store at bonfire.com/store/AWM Studios for your t-shirts and face masks alike. Also, while you're at it, please donate to our Patreon page at patreon.com/AWM Studios. Thank you, and talk to you all in the next story. The Haunted House. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people have tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire, and lit a lamp. Sat there reading the Bible. Then just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. Then there was a lot of thrashing and struggling. And finally, everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the doorknob began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easily and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read again. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went to mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again, and step up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the knob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do. Then she just faded out. The old preacher waited and waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly, step, 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 closer and closer and closer and closer, and it was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time, the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you, and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman, about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off of her face so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyes, but there was sort of blue light where back in the eye socket, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing. She told how her lover had killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and to lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and then she sunk down toward the floor and was gone. The preacher had found her bones buried and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at that bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to that house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hard rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money, and where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out. Thank you for listening to yet another story right here on All Wrestling Madness. I'm Mr. Creepy Wolf, and if you want more stories like this, please subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you get notified every time we drop another video here at AWM Studios. Thank you for listening, and hopefully talk to you all in the next one. One other news fact: if you want any merchandise from us, please go to bonfire.com/store/AWM Studios. And please help support this channel by going right to our Patreon page and donating whatever you can, $1, $2, $5, $10, whatever you can afford to donate. Please donate to help support this channel. Again, that's patreon.com/AWM Studios. One more time for our merchandise, that's bonfire.com/store/AWM Studios. All the link will be in the description down below. Thank you all, and have a great sleep and a great night. Talk to you all in the next one.